Hello everyone. We have a really exciting new series called How to HACCP. And what this series is going to do is demonstrate how to create a basic HACCP plan for a variety of different types of companies. And the first one that we're going to do is one of my personal favorites, chocolate. So our objective today is really simple. We're going to create a basic HACCP plan for just one product that's commonly produced in most chocolate factories. So in this demo today, what we're going to do is we're going to create this HACCP plan going through 9 basic steps. So it's actually possible to combine some of these steps, but for the sake of clarity, let's separate them and do each one individually. In case you don't know what HACCP is, it stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points. And it's actually the international standard that's used to create food safety plans worldwide. So if you want to go to one of the big box retailers and sell your chocolate, or have regulators that need to see the plan, then this is the type of plan that you need to create. In order to make it super easy to create a HACCP plan, we're going to use a piece of software called Icicle that we developed over here at Burton Software. Icicle is a cloud-based application that you can access from anywhere. So let's go ahead and jump into the application, and we're going to undertake the first step, which is creating the processes that are required to manufacture the chocolate. Here we are in the Icicle application, and what we're looking at is a mostly empty account that we've created just for the purpose of this demonstration. And it's for a generic chocolate factory. We can see that we have one company defined, which is the generic chocolate factory itself. One facility, so Icicle supports the notion of multiple facilities, but we have zeros across the board for the rest. The arches at the bottom will give us an indication of where we're at from a food safety perspective, so those will come to life and we'll see them progressing from red into green as we continue to develop the plan. But the first thing that we wanted to do was to create the processes. So let's go ahead and go to the processes by clicking on the process icon. And here we have a process list, which we can see is empty. So what we're going to want here is all the common steps that are normally undertaken in the manufacture of chocolate. And we can create them individually by clicking this plus sign, or we can use the Smart Suggestion feature, which goes in and data mines our existing client base to determine what the commonly used steps are for this type of facility. So the facility happens to be confectionery is the type we selected for that. So that helps the system sort of narrow the list of possible suggestions. So usually we start with a receiving step, and then after receiving, we're going to go both to refrigerated and dry storage. After that, we're probably going to go into, let's go say we're going to do weighing, and then we're going to do melting, and then we're going to do tempering, and then after that we're going to do filling to fill the molds. We're going to want to cool after we fill, and then we're going to want to demold, and then we're going to want to wrap and label, and then let's say that we're going to do packaging, so putting it in cases. And then palletizing, we'll choose finished goods storage, and looks like we're pretty good there. We need shipping, so that's out the door. And then in some cases we may have issues with product that needs to be reworked, so let's select rework as well. And that's a pretty comprehensive list for just the simple clicking of one icon. So it saves us a ton of time if we use that feature. And we'll just click add now, and then that will be added to our list. So now we've got all our processes defined, and step 1 is actually complete. I think it took us about 2 minutes and change, including the explanation. So really, really quick. Now that we've created our processes, it's time to move on to step 2. So what we're going to do here is create the ingredients, and we're going to jump right back into Icicle to see how that's done. So back here at the home page again, we can see that we actually have 15 processes created now in the previous step, but we're going to move on to ingredients. So let's click on the ingredient icon to go to the ingredient list. You can see that we have no records found because we haven't created any ingredients yet. So let's go ahead and create the ingredient. Now there's 2 ways we can do that. One way is we can either search from the database for existing, or we can create a new one ourselves. But always start by selecting an existing record if possible. And what this does is it allows us to create a linkage between the product that you're choosing and the underlying manufacturer so that you can be notified of recalls and that kind of thing. The chocolate we're going to use is a Belgian chocolate by Baucolade, and it's called Latte Clair. So let's have a look and see if we come up with anything in our search. You can see the search is actually going there, and we find no records, which isn't surprising because the scope is set to internal only, which only searches our own, in this case currently empty, ingredient list. So what we want to do is we want to switch that to external only, and this will allow us to search for all the public products in the database. Now this product may or may not be there. I have no idea myself. So let's see what happens when it comes up. And if it's not there, no problem. We'll just create a record for it. There's over, like I said, almost 1 million products, so there's quite a few there. And in fact, yes, we do have that. So what we'll do is we'll just click the add, the word add there. And now this will add that chocolate to our ingredient list. And since we're dealing with solid milk chocolate, this is actually the only ingredient that we have to worry about. So there's really nothing else we need to do for that step. So now we've completed that, and 2 minutes we've created our ingredients. The next step in our process is going to be to create the materials that we need during the manufacturing process. Now the difference between ingredients and materials is that materials are substances that are consumed during the manufacturing process but do not end up on the label. So these are things that are typically used to clean the equipment, lubricants, sanitizers, that type of thing. So anything that is used but doesn't end up in the product. So let's jump back into the application and we'll create a couple of materials. Back in the application again, you can see that we have one ingredient defined, and let's move on to materials. So we'll click the material icon to go to the materials. You can see we don't have any yet, so let's create one. You probably want to be more specific, especially if you're using Icicle for traceability as well, where you need to scan in UPC codes and that kind of thing. But for the purposes of this demo, let's just give it a name. So we'll call this material a sanitizer. We oftentimes would want to define what the quantity is and the gross weight, particularly again if we're using it for traceability, so that the weight of an entire shipment can be calculated. But that's not really that germane to this this demo. So we'll just assume that let's go 4 that's grams. Okay, let's go liters. So we'll say it's a 4-liter container, weighs 1 kilogram. We'll create that. And now we've got our sanitizer defined. Here in the material detail page, we can see now that we've got our inventory level. We don't have any inventory yet. The basic information about the material, and then here's where we assign the hazards, but we'll go into that later. Let's create one more, and one of the things you can do with Icicle is you can just click the back button to go back to the create interface, so you don't necessarily have to go through the menus everywhere. And we'll just create some kind of a generic cleaner. And again, if you're doing this in a production environment, you want to specify exactly what the real name is. We'll leave everything else the same. And if we go back to our material list, we'll see now that we've got actually a cleaner and a sanitizer. 2 things created. This step is finished. Took us under 2 minutes. Step 4 is creating the packaging. And the packaging can include the packaging that actually touches the products, or also the skids, the shrink wrap, the corrugated cardboard boxes that things are packed into. So any kind of packaging material. So let's go back to the Icicle application and create the packaging material. Back in the Icicle application, notice that we've got 2 materials that were defined in the previous step. And now we're going to move on to the packaging. So we'll click the packaging icon. We'll come up with our list of packaging. No records found because we haven't created any yet. So let's create a few different types of packaging. In this case, let's go for paper boxes. We could fill in this information if we want to, not necessarily required, but we'll give it a quantity anyway. Anything with an asterisk is required. If it doesn't have an asterisk, it's not required. So here now we've got our paper boxes. This is our first packaging material, and the inventory, of course, is 0. Let's click the back button, and we're going to create corrugated cardboard boxes as well. We'll click the back button again. Let's pick shrink wrap. We'll create some of that. You only have to do these once, and then once they're created, they're available for all the products that you're using in your system. We're going to go for labels. Might want to specify in reality what type of labels, but that's good enough for now. And let's go for pallets as well. We'll say it's plastic pallets. Okay, so now we've got a number of different types of packaging defined. And how long did that take us? 1 minute, 53 seconds or so, so very, very quick. Moving on to step 5, now that we've created our ingredients, our materials, our packaging, it's time to actually go on and go ahead and create our first product. So let's do that now. Here in the Icicle homepage, we can see that we've got our packaging created that we did in our previous step. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to products. So let's click on products, and we have no records found, which is what we expect because we haven't created one yet. So let's click on the plus sign so we can create a new product. Here's where our UPC code would be. We can enter our GS1 information to have the system automatically create a barcode if we want to, but we're going to skip all of that, and we're just going to go down here to the name, and we're going to call it a milk chocolate bar. We'll move on down. We will pick the gross rate of the product. It's going to be 100, and we're going to call it a gram. Maybe we'll give it 110 grams for packaging as well. Net weight is going to be 100 G. The product category is going to be chocolates. Country of origin, it's going to be the United States. The products, we'll leave all the rest at default. Storage should be less than 20C. The important product characteristics are going to include low water activity. Just changing the case there so everything looks really good in the form. How the product is used is going to be ready to eat. Shelf life will be 12 months. Where the product's sold is going to be retail locations internationally. Labeling instructions, very important. We're going to have an allergen declaration here. So let's give it an allergen declaration. About half of all recalls are caused by undeclared allergens, so extremely important that you make sure that you have the correct labeling allergen declaration for your particular product and jurisdiction. Special distribution control as well. There are some required for chocolate, so let's just cut and paste from the plan I'm looking at here. It's a pre-packaged products. We're producing it at the Wolf Street facility. We'll add the weight here again. This is what actually goes on the case label, so that's where that gets the information from. And we'll create that product record. So now we've got a product, and we're ready to move on to the next step. It's actually taken us already. It's created a formula for the milk chocolate bar, and that's where the interface that we're looking at right now, which is going to be our next step. So just to recap, our next step is completing the formula. So we've created the materials, the ingredients, the packaging, we've defined a product, and now we have to define what are the elements that go into the making of the product. So the first region in the formula has just the basic information about the formula, the name of it, what product it's related to. You can mark it complete once you're finished. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the next region, which is ingredients, and we're going to add the ingredients for this product. I'm actually going to do a little trick here and just click on enter when I go to a space. And what's that going to do is it's going to return my entire product list. And I've got one product here, which is the Leclerc chocolate milk. And it's just off the recorded screen here, but there's the word add, which I can click, and that'll add it to my, my list of ingredients. So now here's my ingredient, and that is the only one for this. So I'm ready to go on to my next region, which is going to be materials. I'm going to do the same thing here, just to highlight the name field and click enter. And now it's going to give me my sanitizer and my cleaner, and I'm going to add both of those. Cross-contamination points is a particular location on a plant floor where you need to identify and control hazards. Most jurisdictions don't require that, so we're going to ignore that for the purposes of this demo. But we've defined our ingredients, we've defined our materials, and now we're going to define the process steps. And you notice that there's no add or create new here. And the reason for that is that we have actually a diagram that lets us model visually our process steps using this design surface. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to add all the various steps to our model. You can also create them right from this interface if you want to by using the new button, but we created them all in advance, which I find to be a little bit faster. Because they're all just right there in the list. Note that if you do add anything from this, or you create a new record from this interface, it is available globally for all your other products as well. So it would have been exactly the same thing as doing it from the processes interface as we did. But I'm just going to add all of the various steps. And what's happening is there's a bit of a staging area at the top. And that staging area in a second, we'll be dragging stuff and dropping it down onto the design surface. So let's start with receiving. It's our first step. And we're going to add a couple of spacers by clicking the spacer button up here. And then we're going to have things go into refrigerated storage and also into dry storage. So, and what we can do is we can go from the center of the bubble to the center of the bubble, and we can create a workflow. So what we're doing here is we're creating a workflow diagram. We're having now, what's our next step? Let's have a look at our flow diagram. I have a cheat. I'm cheating here because I have one off the screen that you guys can't see. So it's going from there into weighing, and then it's going to melting, and then it's going to tempering. In some cases you may want to have a transfer step if there's hazards you want to assign to that. I'm not going to do that for this particular case. We're going to fill the molds. After filling, we're going to have to do some cooling. Then we're going to have to demold. In some cases, we might want to do some rework. So I'm going to drop a rework option there. I'm going to give it a couple of spacers too, just so that it goes down a little bit. If everything looks good, though, we're going to go to a packaging step. So let's add a couple of spacers under refrigerated storage as well. Then we're going to go to wrapping and labeling, and then we're going to go to packing, and then we're going to go to palletizing, and then finished goods storage, and then shipping. Now your model might be as simple as this, or it might be more complicated, which is totally fine. So the important thing really, there's really two important things to understand here. One is that these are all process steps, so everything should be a verb. Ideally, you don't want. I see people do all kinds of strange things when they don't understand this, so they'll put in the names of machines, or like wrapper, for example, instead of wrapping. But if you think about things as actions or verbs, then that's really going to help kind of clarify in your mind how to model these correctly. Just want my diagram there. Okay, so what's happening now is we've got our, actually let's do one thing different. We're gonna, let me just switch the two storages around, because our refrigerated storage is going into the melting phase and our others are in packaging. So if we put it under packaging, it's going to be a lot simpler. Okay, or we put it above the packaging process steps. So we go, the chocolate is in refrigerated storage. It's going to go to weighing and then melting and then tempering. Depends where you are. Some cases you might not refrigerate your chocolate if your building's already cold enough. Demolding. After the demolding, I might find that some pieces aren't properly shaped, so I'm going to send them up to rework, back to melting. Everything that looks good from the demolder, I'm going to send to the wrapper, and then packing, palletizing, finished goods storage, and then shipping. So now we have our complete flow diagram, and we're finished with this step. Now we're ready to move on to step 7, which is identifying the hazards. So let's go do that. Just before we move on to identifying the hazards, actually, let's just assign the packaging to the products, which I haven't done yet. So I want to make sure I complete that step before I move on. So I'm going to go click on the product icon, and I'm going to go to the little pencil, which allows me to edit my product. And when I'm in the product edit interface, I can see at the bottom the packaging material, and I have a choice to assign one or more items to the list, and I'm going to add them all. So I'm going to say that this product uses cardboard boxes with labels, paper boxes, etc. So I'm going to click Save, and now I've got my packaging assigned to the product. Okay, so let's move on to the assignment of hazards. If I move back to the home page again, you can see that there's these 5 arches down here at the bottom, and these are the 5 things that hazards can be assigned to. So I can assign hazards to ingredients, to materials, to processes, packaging, and cross-contamination points. Again, we're going to ignore this cross-contamination point 1 for the purposes of this demonstration. But let's go ahead and click on ingredients. So we'll go to the ingredient list. And when we're in the ingredient list, we'll look at the detail of our milk chocolate. Now, there's a region down at the bottom of the detail of the ingredient that is for hazards. And I can search for my list of hazards. There's lots of hazards in the database, but I want to be a little bit more selective. So I'm going to use the Smart Suggestion feature, and it's going to give me a shorter list of possible hazards. And one of the things that's very common in chocolate is salmonella poisoning. So let's see what we've got here. We got presence of pathogenic bacteria. So I'm going to select that one. And what else is maybe interesting here? Let's just have a look. This is one that I see quite often chocolate manufacturers using. And there may be others that are of interest to you too. In fact, that one is very close. I'm trying to find the best ones here. I like that one a little bit better. It's almost the same. But let's just select those two for now. So keep in mind that in your case, depending on your supplier, the type of specific product that you're using, there may be more hazards than the ones that you see here. There's a big disclaimer that explains that in excruciating detail. But all I'll do is I'll click Add now, and I've added these two hazards to my ingredient. And let's move on to the hazards related to packaging and materials and process steps. If I go to materials, I can see my sanitizer. Essentially, I do exactly the same thing. I can click my Smart Suggestion feature. It gives me a list of potential hazards that other people are using. I'm going to pick contamination by non-food chemicals. And that's the only one I'm going to select right now. Your list, again, may be different. I'm going to go back to the list, and I am going to go to the cleaner. I'm going to do the same thing with that. Contamination by non-food chemicals. Those two are almost the same. One has the word "and" in it. Could be that the chemical excessive concentration of that could be a problem too, so let's go ahead and pick two of those. Great, now I've got my hazards assigned for materials. Go back to my home page again. I'm going to look at my processes. So I'm not going to go through all of these right now. I would actually click on my suggestion list again. I think I should choose metal detection because usually this is the CCP and it's the most important one when dealing with food safety. So let's select metal detection. I'll go to the detail for that process, and now metal detection selects metal. So I could type in the word metal and it's going to give me all kinds of things. You can see that when I use the search interface directly, it gives me a lot of extraneous information, like chips out of a bone cleaver, for example. It doesn't really make any sense in the chocolate environment. So it's really better generally to use the Smart Suggestion feature, and it narrows the list down a bit. So here I'm going to say that I've got presence of metal fragments in incoming material, and contamination with metal. Could have metal fragments from municipal piping. Sometimes the hazards can be quite generic, like this one, hazardous extraneous material, probably not specific enough, so be careful when you're choosing them. Let's just go with those two for right now. And again, if you want to, here you can enter your own hazard, pick the hazard type, and click Create New, and it'll add a new one to your list. So you're not stuck with only what's in the system. You can create your own as well. Okay. So now we've done hazards related to our ingredient, to our materials. We haven't done packaging yet, so let's go into packaging. It's done the same exact way as all the rest. And let's say one of the hazards, let's have a look at labels. Use the Smart Suggestion feature. Presence of chemicals that's not approved for food contact, especially with inks and adhesives. That's really a common one, so we'll choose that one. So now we've added that hazard as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just add all the rest of the hazards, and you got the idea. Go to the detail, use the Smart Suggestion feature, or create your own hazards, or search from the database for each ingredient, material, process step, and packaging. Make sure that you've got all the hazards identified. After all the hazards are created, what we're going to want to do next is to control them. So let's have a look at how to do that. So back on the home page, we're going to want to go into each of these things and control the hazards. So the way that we do that is we'll go to the list, and when we're at the list, We'll click on the details of each product, or in this case, ingredient. When we get to the ingredient detail, we'll scroll down to the hazards, and we'll see that both of these hazards are incomplete. So in order to control the hazard, all we do is click on the word incomplete. And this takes us to an interface that we can use now to determine how the hazard is controlled. So the question is, for the milk chocolate itself, we have a hazard related to unhygienic employee practices, and this is a biological hazard. Could the hazard be fully controlled by prerequisite program? So that's the first question that's asked. And the way that it works is that depending on your answer, different questions pop up, boxes for you to enter in some text detail, or a conclusion in red at the bottom, or different questions that lead to different answers. But in this case, the first question, is the hazard fully controlled by prerequisite program? We'll say yes. And the hazard that's going to control that is going to be your SOP, let's call it supplier compliance. Actually, we don't really need to say SOP at the front and the back, so we'll leave it like that. If you're using like a GFSI scheme, like SQF or BRC or something, you might want to enter in whatever the bullet reference is. So if you can connect that together to your prerequisite program requirements from your GFSI scheme, it kind of makes the whole thing flow really nicely. But in this case, we'll just call it supplier compliance. If you're in a jurisdiction that requires a hazard analysis, then you can indicate what the likelihood and severity would be if this hazard were to actually happen. So if you contaminated food based on unhygienic employee practices, could be major, and it's fairly likely that that could happen. So we'll click that square and we'll click save, and now the hazard is controlled. If we go back now a couple of steps, we can click on you can see that this one's now complete. We can go to our other hazard, and this one is completed by, let's say that it's controlled as well by a prerequisite program. This prerequisite program is going to be my quality control, SOP, which is going to dictate that the product needs to be free of pathogenic bacteria before shipping to our facility. So we could say also that there might be a letter of guarantee. Probably spell that correctly would be better. There we go. And just like the other one, I think that the presence of any of these bacteria in the milk chocolate would be definitely major and likely, maybe even higher. I'll click save, and now my hazards are done for my ingredients. Now if I go back to the home page again, you can see that my dial has come to life. I have 2 hazards identified and controlled, so all my ingredient hazards that I've defined are controlled. And I need to essentially do the same thing exactly for materials, processes, and packaging. I won't show you for materials and packaging because it really is exactly the same. I just go to materials and control the hazard just like I did for ingredients. The process ones are slightly different. And the reason it's different is because imagine that you have an enterprise with lots of different facilities. It doesn't matter which facility you use your ingredient at, it always is the same hazard. The same with materials and packaging. But the process hazards are controlled differently. And it could be that the process is the hazard control, and this can vary from facility to facility. Therefore, to control the process hazards, you need to go to the facility itself. So that's one little nuance that you need to be aware of. So I'm going to go to my facilities, and in this case we've only got one facility, so let's have a look at the detail of the facility. And here at the facilities I can see all the hazards that are used. And it's interesting that my metal detection is not here. And the reason it's not here is because I added that after I did the flow diagram, and I forgot to include the metal detection step. So one of the things that you can do in Icicle as well is you can actually open different windows. So you can work with multiple windows at the same time, and I'm going to use that feature now. So I'm going to go to my formulas, and I'm going to say, I was expecting it to say open in a new tab. There we go. Open in a new tab. And I'm going to go to my diagram, my flow diagram, and I'm going to add here metal detection. And I'm going to do metal detection probably after I do wrapping and labeling, before packing. So I'm going to insert that right there. Okay, so now I have that done. And if I just refresh my facility detail page there, now I can see that I've got metal detection defined. So when I refresh the page, I see that the metal detection is incomplete. So what I'm going to want to do now is I'm going to want to control the hazards. And from this point on, I do it exactly the same way I did for ingredients. So I'll just click on the word incomplete itself. And now it's going to show me the metal detection within the context of the Wall Street facility. So this is, instead of universal to the entire organization, it's going to be just for this one facility. And from this point, I can really simply click this button. And now I'm going to be able to control the hazard. Now, is this hazard controlled by prerequisite program? No. Could a control measure be used? Yes. What would be the control measure? Let's say metal detection. Is it likely that contamination could occur? Yes. Acceptable level. Let's say that it's less than 2 millimeters pieces of metal. Is this process step specifically designed to eliminate or reduce the likelihood or occurrence of the hazard to an acceptable level? Yes. Now it's telling me that it is a critical control point. So it's going to want me to put in a critical control point number. I'm going to call this CCP01. Some people might go 1P for physical, but I'm just going to use CCP01. My critical limits, again, are going to be less than 2 millimeters. My monitoring procedures, I'm going to put a note now to refer to metal detection monitoring procedure. So you're going to have a document for that. And sometimes some people do write out the whole procedure here, but I find that making a reference to a procedure where you can store elsewhere in the Icicle system under records, or it's not. It's here actually. Here it's got its own icon, procedures. So this is where you would store the procedures. So instead of writing it out here and creating it in the procedure section, I would just create it in the procedure section and then make a reference. And then the records is going to be the metal detection log. The risk analysis. Probably going to be a moderate effect and quite possible. It's a little arbitrary, but you just pick the square that you think is most likely. And now we've got the CCP defined. Now notice that if it's metal detector CCP, you don't really need to define more than one CCP for the same process step, because the process step is already going to be defined as a CCP. So usually I just do the first one as a CCP. And then here too, in this case, I'll refer it back to the same program. Program procedure reference. Actually, I don't even need to say refer to, just metal detection procedure. And we'll pick possible and major for that one. Click save. And now we've got our hazards controlled for the metal detection. So going back to the dial, we can see that we've got 2 hazards associated with ingredients, 2 hazards associated with metal detection. Obviously, in a fully elaborated plan, you're going to have more hazards and more ingredients, more materials, more of everything. But for the purposes of this demo, I think it's going to give you a great understanding of how the HACCP plan is generated, which we're going to do in the next step. In the meantime, I'm going to go into materials and the packaging, and I'm just going to control the hazards that we defined there as well, so that we have at least a reasonable subset of the hazards identified for our generic chocolate food safety plan. Okay, now we've almost reached the end of our journey. So the last step is to actually generate the HACCP plan, which I'm sure you'll find is going to be very, very painless and easy. So back at the Icicle application for the final time, we're going to go to the HACCP plan section of the application by clicking on that link, and we're going to create a HACCP plan. Now, notice that Icicle is quite different than other solutions in that you don't have to have created the plan and then assign the hazards to the plan. I think that that's not the most ideal way to do things. The hazards are associated directly with those elements that they're related to. So if it's an ingredient hazard, it's associated to an ingredient. If it's a material hazard, it's associated to a material. And now the benefit of doing this way is that because the hazards belong to each of the constituent elements, you can create as many different HACCP plans as you want, and you can mix and match products on different HACCP plans. So if you have one that you want to give to your big box customer where they only buy 4 products from you, you can do that. If you want to give one to the regulator with all the products on it, you can do that. If you want to split your products up into for chocolates, maybe solid chocolates with nuts, solid chocolate without nuts, and truffles, you can have 3 plans with those products. So there's really nothing whatsoever to restrict you from how you configure your plans. So I'm just going to call this one my first plan, and I'm going to select my Wall Street facility and give it an effective date. So I'll call it today, and I'll create the plan. Now once the plan is created, I go and I'm going to add my milk chocolate bar. Oh, and I need to include a schematic diagram. So the schematic diagram, we're going to use our other tab here again, and we're going to go back to our facility. And if we go to the facility, down at the bottom of the facility, we've got a floor plan and schematic diagram section. So here we're going to just click the new button to open up a new file, and I should have some sort of floor plan. Here's one for a hatchery, but it's okay. That'll give us a general idea. And if we go back to our plan configuration again, so all I did there is uploaded an image of the floor schematic. Okay, so now we're going to save that. And now we've got our plan configured. So we've got one product defined. We could have multiple products. We have a schematic diagram, and we can see that we've uploaded a schematic, which is a change that's been done since this plan was created. So the system keeps a change log so you can easily show the auditor what's changed since last time. Anyway, to generate the plan, we simply click the little scroll icon, and the HACCP plan is generated for us. So title page, product description, all the information, ready to eat, shelf life, all of that kind of thing. It goes into the formula, and it combines a list of all of the hazards that have been defined for the various types of ingredients, materials, packaging, and lists them all on this page. The flow diagram with the CCP annotations, the abbreviations for the process steps. If there's a hazard defined with respect to the process step, it'll put a BCP abbreviation. The plant schematic diagram should show the product flows and personnel flows. Biological, chemical, physical hazards are broken out into separate forms. You can see some of the ones that we entered here, like for the cleaners, for chemical, for example. Physical hazards that were controlled by metal detection. The CCP determination form, Form 8, is essentially the answers to all our questions that we did during the hazard analysis. Anything that's not controlled, if your jurisdiction allows you to define hazards that are not controlled, they'll appear on this Form 9. Form 10 is the heart of the HACCP plan. It's the critical control point page that shows you that we've got one critical control point here, which is metal detection. Any process controls, which are hazards that, they're process steps that completely but not totally control a hazard. Or let me rephrase that. They're process steps that partially but not completely control. Process controls are process steps that partially but not completely control a hazard. So those would be listed here if we had defined any. And any changes that were approved since the last time the plan was changed would appear in the change log. Nothing here because the plan's never been approved. Anyway, you can see now that the plan has been fully generated. Just before we leave this, I want to show you one more very interesting feature. If we go to the product now, again, we'll go to our product list. And let's select our milk chocolate bar one more time. And let's say, for example, that we make not just milk chocolate. Let's say that we make also dark chocolates. So in order to do that, we have a cloning, the ability to clone products. So there's some very powerful advanced features in Icicle. This is one of them, cloning. So what we can do is we can take our milk chocolate bar, and we can just simply click the little clone button. And now that's going to allow us to create a dark chocolate bar. And we're going to click clone. And everything related to the milk chocolate bar is going to be included in this dark chocolate bar now. And what we're going to want to, the only thing that we really need to do is we need to go to the formula. And in the formula, we're going to remove this chocolate. I'm going to copy a little bit of the text first. And I'm going to remove that because we don't put milk chocolate in our dark chocolate bar. And instead, now I'm going to search for that size container from all available items. And we're searching through a very large database here, so it takes a minute, but it will come back. And I see that that's actually the only one of that size that I have. So let's see what I have for dark chocolate. Got a couple here. Here's a Belcolade one. So let's go ahead and add that one. The add button's just off the screen. So now I have this this dark chocolate, this Belcolade dark chocolate as my ingredient instead of the milk chocolate. Now notice that if I go back to my HACCP plan, actually just before I go there, I may need to do one more thing. Let's make sure that we've indicated that it's produced at this facility. It's not, so I'm going to add it to my Wall Street facility. So I need to be able to say that this product is produced at this facility in order to put it on the HACCP plan. So let's go back to my HACCP plan. I'm going to edit the plan, and I'm going to add my dark chocolate bar to the plan and save it. So now I can click the generate button again, and I can generate a complete HACCP plan that has two products on it. And you can see that because I did the bulk of the work with the first product, the second one, I literally did in a couple of minutes. And there's other features as well, such as the notion of product inheritance that lets you create one generic chocolate bar, for example, and then have all the specific types share the packaging and the process steps. So there's ways that you can really, really quickly get up and running with a complete HACCP plan very, very quickly. If any of this was as clear as mud and you have questions, feel free to contact us. You can call up and ask for me directly. I'm Steve Burton. I'm the CEO of Burton Software. Always happy to field your questions or have one of my people do it. And you can reach us by email at sales1.burtonsoftware.com. Oh, I should actually also mention the URL. So I'll do another slide with that in 1 second. If you're interested in more information on the Icicle product or to review any of the material that we have on our website, here's the URL, www.burtonsoftware.com. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this helped.